How do we stop 4 armed agents? By being faster, smarter, and more unpredictable than they expect. Sarah looked at each of us in turn. This is going to be dangerous. These people are trained to kill enhanced humans specifically. They know our capabilities and have developed tactics to counter them. But they don't know our specific abilities, Marcus pointed out. They're expecting certain standard enhancements, not the unique combination we represent. Sarah smiled. Exactly. Tommy, your speed and reaction time can get you close before they can target you. Jennifer, your endurance means you can maintain peak performance throughout a prolonged engagement. Marcus, your tactical awareness will help you anticipate their strategies. And Jake, my adaptation will let me counter whatever they throw at us, I finished. The key is coordination. Enhanced humans working together can achieve things that individual abilities can't match. The scanning equipment was almost fully assembled now. We could see readouts appearing on their tablets, dots of light that probably represented the enhanced humans scattered throughout our town. Now or never, Sarah said. She broke cover first, moving across the open ground between the gymnasium and the main building at inhuman speed. The hunters spotted her immediately, but their reactions were just a fraction too slow. By the time they'd raised their weapons, Sarah was already among them. What followed was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. Sarah moved like liquid lightning, her strikes precise and devastating. The first hunter went down before he could fire a shot. The second managed to get off a single round that missed by inches, as Sarah flowed around his aim. But these weren't ordinary security guards or police officers. These were specialists trained specifically for hunting enhanced humans. They adapted quickly, using tactics designed to counter superhuman speed and agility. The tall woman, clearly their leader, activated some kind of device that emitted a high-pitched whine. Sarah stumbled, her movements becoming less fluid, more predictable. Sonic disruptor, she gasped, interferes with enhanced nervous systems. That's when the rest of us entered the fight. Tommy came in from the left flank, moving so fast he was just a blur. But instead of attacking directly, he used his speed to circle the hunters, forcing them to divide their attention. Every time they tried to track his movement, he was already somewhere else. Jennifer approached from the right, her enhanced endurance allowing her to maintain top speed while constantly changing direction. She grabbed the sonic disruptor from the team leader and hurled it across the parking lot, where it shattered against the gymnasium wall. Marcus coordinated our movements with tactical precision, calling out positions and predicting the hunters' responses. Tommy, left side. Jennifer, watch the crossfire. Jake, the leader's going for backup weapons. I moved to intercept the team leader, my body adapting to the combat situation in real time. My reflexes sharpened, my strength increased, my awareness expanded to encompass the entire battlefield. When she pulled a secondary weapon, I was already moving to counter it. The fight lasted less than 3 minutes, but it felt like hours. When it was over, all 4 hunters were unconscious or incapacitated, their equipment scattered and broken. Is that it? Tommy asked, still vibrating with adrenaline. Did we win? Sarah was checking the hunters' communications equipment, monitoring for any signals that might indicate backup was coming. This was just the advance team. There will be others. How many others? Unknown. But word of this engagement will spread quickly through their network. Enhanced humans who fight back, who coordinate their abilities effectively, represent a threat they can't ignore. I looked around at my teammates, seeing them with new eyes. We'd just fought against trained killers and won, using abilities we'd only discovered hours earlier. The implications were staggering. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now we prepare for the real war, Sarah said. Because after today, enhanced humans everywhere are going to know that resistance is possible. And the organizations that have been hunting us are going to know that we're not as helpless as they thought. She gathered the hunters' equipment, studying their tactical displays and communication devices. This scanning data shows the locations of enhanced humans throughout the region. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. All potential targets, Jennifer said. All potential allies, Sarah corrected. If we can reach them, warn them, help them understand what they are and what they're capable of, We could build an army, I finished. Not an army, a community. A network of enhanced humans who refuse to hide, who are willing to stand up for their right to exist. As we gathered the unconscious hunter's gear and prepared to leave the school, I thought about how much had changed in the past 24 hours. Yesterday, I'd been a high school cross-country runner, worried about college applications and personal records. Today, I was part of something larger, something that could reshape the balance of power between enhanced and normal humans. The tablet Sarah had given me was still displaying the regional map, but now it showed something different. Instead of isolated blue dots scattered across the landscape, the enhanced humans in our area were beginning to connect, forming networks of communication and support. Word was spreading. The age of hiding was ending, and we were just getting started. 3 months later, I stood on the same track where Sarah had first demonstrated her true abilities. But now I wasn't alone. Dozens of enhanced humans had gathered here, people from communities across 3 states who'd heard about what happened in Riverside. Some had speed like Sarah's, others had strength that defied physics, or intelligence that bordered on precognition, or sensory abilities that seemed almost supernatural. All of them had spent years hiding what they were, pretending to be normal, living in fear of discovery. Now they were learning to embrace their gifts, to use them openly, to support each other in ways that had never been possible before. The hunters still came, of course. The organizations that wanted to control or eliminate enhanced humans hadn't given up, but they were finding it much harder to operate in a world where their targets fought back, where enhanced communities shared information and coordinated their defenses. My own abilities had continued to evolve, adapting to each new challenge, growing stronger with every test. Tommy had become something approaching a force of nature, his speed and agility reaching levels that required new words to describe. Jennifer's endurance had developed to the point where she could maintain peak performance indefinitely. Marcus had become a master strategist, capable of coordinating complex operations across multiple enhanced communities. And Sarah had become something more than just a runner with superhuman speed. She'd become a leader, a symbol of what enhanced humans could accomplish when they stopped hiding and started working together. "Nervous?" she asked, appearing beside me with her characteristic soundless movement. I looked out at the crowd gathered on the track, enhanced humans from dozens of different communities, all here to participate in what we were calling the first enhanced athletics exhibition. Not a competition, exactly, but a demonstration of what we were capable of when we stopped pretending to be normal. "Excited," I said. "For the first time in my life, I get to see what I can really do." Sarah smiled, the warm expression I'd grown to associate with her true self rather than the careful mask she'd worn during her weeks of hiding. "Then let's show the world what enhanced humans look like when they stop running away." The starting gun fired, and we began to run. Not the careful, measured pace of athletes worried about maintaining their cover, but the full expression of abilities that had been suppressed for too long. As we moved around the track, I felt that familiar sensation of my body adapting, improving, becoming more than it had been moments before. But this time, I wasn't alone in the experience. Every enhanced human on that track was pushing their limits, exploring their potential, becoming everything they were meant to be. And somewhere in the crowd of spectators, I knew there were others watching, people who'd felt that spark of something more than human, wondering if they too might be part of this new evolution. The age of hiding was over. The age of enhanced humans had begun, and we were faster than anyone had ever imagined possible. The Eniawansuk's athletics exhibition was supposed to be a celebration, a chance for our community to demonstrate their abilities openly for the first time in history. But as I watched the crowd gathering in the stands surrounding Riverside High's track, I could see that not everyone was there to celebrate. Mixed in with the families and supporters were faces I didn't recognize, people whose posture and alertness suggested they weren't just curious spectators. Some carried equipment that looked more sophisticated than typical recording devices. Others wore clothing that seemed designed to conceal rather than display. "They're here," Sarah said quietly, moving up beside me as I scanned the crowd. "Government observers, media representatives, probably a few hunter teams maintaining surveillance. Should we be worried? We should be ready." She gestured toward the enhanced humans warming up on the track. "Everyone here knows the risks. They chose to come anyway, to be part of something bigger than individual survival." The past 3 months had transformed not just our small group, but enhanced communities across the entire region. Word of our successful defense against the hunters had spread through networks we hadn't even known existed, reaching people who'd spent decades hiding their abilities in isolation. They'd started reaching out, carefully at first, then with growing confidence as they realized they weren't alone. Dr. Elizabeth Hoffman, a professor of genetics at the State University, had revealed that her research into human performance enhancement wasn't theoretical, but personal. She could process information at rates that made supercomputers seem sluggish. Marcus Williams Sr., Tommy's father and a mechanic who'd always seemed to have an intuitive understanding of how machines worked, admitted that his abilities went far beyond normal technical knowledge. He could perceive mechanical problems through what he'd always called gut instinct, but was actually enhanced sensory processing. Even Coach Martinez had eventually confessed that his success with our cross-country team wasn't just due to good training methods. His ability to recognize potential in athletes, to predict their development patterns, to know exactly how hard to push each individual runner, came from enhanced cognitive abilities he'd been unconsciously using for years. The community that had formed around these revelations was unlike anything in recorded history. Enhanced humans sharing knowledge, supporting each other's development, creating networks of mutual protection that made it much harder for hunter teams to operate effectively. But growth brought visibility, and visibility brought new dangers. Jake Morrison? The voice came from behind me, and I turned to see a woman in her 40s approaching. She wore a press badge identifying her as Linda Chen from the Washington Post, but something about her demeanor suggested she was more than just a journalist. Yes? I'm writing a story about the enhanced human community. Would you be willing to answer a few questions about your experiences? Sarah stepped slightly closer, her body language shifting into what I'd learned to recognize as a defensive posture. What kind of story? An objective examination of the claims being made about human performance enhancement. The public has a right to know whether these demonstrations represent genuine abilities or elaborate hoaxes. And if they're genuine? I asked. Linda Chen's expression didn't change, but I caught something in her eyes that looked less like journalistic curiosity and more like assessment. Then there are important questions about public safety, government regulation, and the potential implications for society as a whole. Before I could respond, Tommy appeared at my shoulder, moving with the silent speed that had become second nature to him. Journalists asking the tough questions already? The exhibition hasn't even started yet. Mr. Rodriguez, Linda said, consulting her notes. You're listed as one of the featured athletes today. What would you say to critics who claim these performances are impossible according to known laws of physics? Tommy grinned, but it wasn't his usual cocky expression. This smile had an edge to it, a confidence born from months of pushing the boundaries of what he'd thought possible. I'd say they're about to get a pretty comprehensive education in what the laws of physics actually allow. The conversation was interrupted by an announcement from the track's public address system. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first Enhanced Athletics exhibition. Today's demonstrations will showcase abilities that represent the next stage of human evolution. Coach Martinez's voice carried across the facility with unusual authority. Over the past months, he'd transformed from a high school athletics instructor into something approaching a spokesman for the enhanced community. His understanding of both normal and enhanced physiology made him uniquely qualified to explain what spectators were about to witness. The individuals you'll see performing today are not using performance-enhancing drugs, mechanical assistance, or any form of technological augmentation. What you'll witness are natural human abilities that have been suppressed, hidden, or misunderstood for generations. As he spoke, I noticed more people with press badges taking positions around the track. Some had cameras and recording equipment, but others carried devices I couldn't identify. Sarah followed my gaze and nodded slightly, confirming that she'd spotted them too. The first demonstration will be speed trials, Coach Martinez continued. These will not be races in the traditional sense, but rather displays of individual capability designed to establish baseline measurements for enhanced human performance. Sarah was first up, positioning herself at the starting line for what was announced as a 400-meter demonstration. But instead of the usual racing stance, she stood relaxed, almost casual, like she was preparing for a warm-up jog rather than a maximum effort. The current world record for women's 400 meters is 47.60 seconds, Coach Martinez announced. This record has stood for decades and is considered to be near the absolute limit of human performance. Linda Chen was recording everything on a device that looked more sophisticated than a typical journalist's equipment. Around the track, other observers were similarly documenting what was about to happen. "Whenever you're ready, Sarah," Coach Martinez said. Sarah nodded, took a deep breath, and began to run. What happened next redefined my understanding of what motion could look like. Sarah didn't just run fast, she seemed to transcend the normal relationship between effort and speed. Her stride covered impossible distances, her feet barely seemed to touch the track surface, and her movement was so fluid it looked more like flight than running. She completed the first 200 meters in less than 15 seconds, a pace that would have shattered world records if maintained. But instead of slowing down, she seemed to accelerate, her form becoming even more efficient as she settled into her rhythm. The crowd fell silent, then began murmuring in amazement and confusion. People were checking their watches, comparing notes, trying to process what they were seeing. Sarah crossed the finish line in 31.2 seconds. The silence that followed was profound. Coach Martinez let it stretch for several heartbeats before speaking. 31.2 seconds for 400 meters. That's more than 16 seconds faster than the current world record. Impossible, someone called out from the crowd. The timing equipment must be malfunctioning. The timing is being monitored by 3 separate systems, Coach Martinez replied calmly. All show the same result. Linda Chen was typing rapidly on her device, but her expression suggested she was documenting more than just performance statistics. I had the uncomfortable feeling that we were providing her with exactly the kind of information she'd been sent to gather. Tommy's demonstration came next, but instead of a straight speed trial, he'd chosen to showcase his reaction time and agility. The setup involved a complex obstacle course with barriers that could be activated remotely, forcing him to react to unpredictable challenges at superhuman speeds. Human reaction time to visual stimuli is typically between 0.2 and 0.3 seconds, Coach Martinez explained as Tommy took his starting position. The course Tommy will navigate includes obstacles that activate with no advance warning, requiring reaction times below 0.1 second to successfully complete. The course began simply enough, with Tommy moving through a series of stationary hurdles at impressive but not impossible speed. Then the active elements began triggering, barriers rising from the track surface with no pattern or warning. Tommy flowed around them like he could see the future, his body changing direction before the obstacles fully appeared, his movements so precise that he never came within inches of touching any barrier. But it was more than just speed and agility. There was something almost supernatural about the way he navigated the course, as if he was operating on information that wasn't available to normal human senses. He completed the full obstacle course in under 20 seconds, a time that would have been impressive even if the barriers had been stationary. With the unpredictable active elements, it should have been impossible. How? Linda Chen asked, abandoning any pretense of objective journalism. How is that kind of performance possible? Enhanced neural processing, Dr. Hoffman answered, stepping forward from the group of observers. Tommy's brain can process sensory information and coordinate motor responses at rates that exceed normal human capabilities by several orders of magnitude. Are you claiming these individuals have been genetically modified? I'm claiming they represent a natural variation in human genetics that's been present in the population for generations but rarely recognized or understood. Jennifer's demonstration focused on endurance, but not in the way most people understood the concept. Instead of simply running for a long time, she showcased the ability to maintain peak performance indefinitely. She started with a series of 400-meter intervals at a pace that would have been challenging for most competitive runners to maintain for a single lap. Then she continued, lap after lap, without any decrease in speed or apparent increase in effort. After 30 minutes of continuous high-intensity running, she showed no signs of fatigue. Her breathing remained controlled, her form stayed perfect, and her lap times remained consistent to the 10th of a second. Conventional exercise physiology suggests that sustained effort at this intensity should result in lactate buildup, oxygen debt, and muscular fatigue within minutes, Dr. Hoffman explained to the increasingly restless crowd. Jennifer's physiology appears to operate under different parameters. Different how? Linda Chen pressed. Enhanced metabolic efficiency, improved oxygen utilization, possibly altered muscle fiber composition. Her body processes energy and manages waste products in ways that allow for sustained peak performance. Marcus's demonstration was perhaps the most unsettling for the observers, because it involved abilities that were harder to measure but impossible to explain through conventional understanding. He positioned himself at the center of the track while the rest of us spread out around the facility. Without any visible communication or coordination, he began directing our movements through subtle gestures and positioning changes. To the spectators, it looked like an elaborate choreographed performance. But those of us participating knew that Marcus was reading and predicting our intended actions in real time, orchestrating complex patterns of movement that none of us had discussed or practiced. When Tommy decided to change direction unexpectedly, Marcus was already gesturing for him to adjust his path to avoid a collision with Jennifer. When I began accelerating for a sprint, Marcus had already signaled Sarah to clear the lane before I'd consciously decided which direction to go. "Predictive tactical awareness," Dr. Hoffman said, her voice carrying a note of wonder despite her scientific training. "Marcus can process multiple variables, predict outcomes, and coordinate complex group activities at a level that approaches precognition." "Precognition?" Linda Chen's voice was sharp. "Are you seriously claiming these individuals have psychic abilities?" "I'm claiming they have cognitive capabilities that exceed normal human parameters by significant margins. Whether you call that enhanced intelligence, intuitive processing, or precognition is largely a matter of terminology. My own demonstration was the most challenging to design, because adaptive enhancement was harder to showcase in a brief exhibition. We'd settled on a series of escalating challenges that would force my abilities to evolve in real time. I started with a standard 800-meter run, establishing a baseline performance. Then I repeated the distance while carrying a weighted vest. Then again with additional obstacles. Then with active interference from other enhanced humans trying to impede my progress. With each iteration, my body adapted not just to the specific challenge, but to the general concept of increased difficulty. My stride became more efficient, my energy utilization improved, and my awareness expanded to encompass new variables. By the final trial, I was completing the 800-meter course under conditions that should have made it impossible to match my initial baseline time. Instead, I was running significantly faster, my physiology having evolved to meet each new demand. "Real-time adaptive enhancement," Dr. Hoffman announced to the crowd. "Jake's genetic structure appears to include mechanisms for rapid evolutionary response to environmental pressures." "Evolution doesn't work that fast," someone called out from the stands. "Normal evolution doesn't," Dr. Hoffman agreed. "But we're not dealing with normal genetics here." As the formal demonstrations concluded, I could see the impact on the crowd. Some spectators looked amazed. Others appeared frightened, and a significant number seemed skeptical despite the evidence they'd just witnessed. But it was the reaction of the observers, with press badges and sophisticated equipment, that concerned me most. They weren't just documenting what they'd seen. They were analyzing it, measuring it, preparing to disseminate information about enhanced human capabilities to audiences we couldn't control. "Phase 1 complete," Sarah said quietly, moving to stand beside me as the crowd began to disperse. Everyone performed flawlessly. "Phase 1? What's Phase 2? Dealing with the consequences of going public." Before I could ask what she meant, Linda Chen approached us again, but this time she wasn't alone. 2 men in dark suits flanked her, their posture and alertness immediately recognizable as government agents. "Mr. Morrison, Ms. Chen," Linda said, her previous pretense of journalistic interest completely abandoned. "We need to discuss the implications of today's demonstrations." "What kind of implications?" Sarah asked, her stance shifting subtly into a defensive position. "The kind that affect national security, public safety, and social stability," one of the agents replied. "Individuals with these capabilities represent potential threats that require careful assessment and management." "Management?" I repeated. "Integration into existing frameworks for monitoring and controlling enhanced human populations," Linda clarified. "The demonstrations today have made it impossible to ignore the existence of your community. Now we need to determine how that community fits into broader societal structures." Around us, I could see other enhanced humans being approached by similar groups of officials. The exhibition had accomplished exactly what we'd intended, making our abilities undeniably visible. But visibility came with consequences we were only beginning to understand. "And if we don't want to be integrated into your frameworks?" Tommy asked, appearing beside us with his characteristic silent movement. That would be inadvisable, the second agent said. Enhanced humans operating outside official oversight represent unacceptable risks. Risks to whom? Marcus asked, joining our growing group. To everyone, Linda replied. People with capabilities like yours could destabilize economic systems, undermine competitive fairness, pose security threats, or create social divisions between enhanced and normal humans. Or, Sarah said quietly, we could work together to build something better than what currently exists. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the track entrance. More vehicles were arriving, some with government plates, others unmarked but clearly official. People in uniforms and suits were spreading out around the facility, establishing what looked suspiciously like a perimeter. What's happening? I asked. Standard protocol for situations involving enhanced human populations, Linda explained. Containment, while assessment and integration procedures are implemented. Containment? Jennifer had joined us now, along with Dr. Hoffman and several other enhanced humans from the exhibition. Temporary restriction of movement, while we determine appropriate long-term measures, one of the agents clarified. I looked around the facility, counting the number of officials who'd arrived in the past few minutes. There had to be at least 30 of them, armed and organized, positioning themselves to control all exits from the track complex. This is what integration looks like? Sarah asked. This is what necessary caution looks like when dealing with individuals who pose potential threats to public safety, Linda replied. But even as she spoke, I could see her checking a device similar to the tablet Sarah had shown me months earlier. The display showed dots of light, and I realized they were tracking the enhanced humans present at the exhibition. You're scanning us, I said. We're identifying and cataloging individuals with enhanced capabilities for inclusion in appropriate databases, she confirmed. The same databases the hunter teams use to select targets? Linda's expression didn't change, but I caught a flicker of something that might have been confirmation. Enhanced humans who cooperate with integration procedures have much better long-term outcomes than those who resist. Around the track, the situation was escalating. Officials were approaching individual enhanced humans, requesting identification, asking them to submit to additional scanning procedures. Most were complying, but I could see tension building in others. Dr. Hoffman stepped forward, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to dealing with official bureaucracy. I assume you have warrants for these procedures? Legal authorization for what appears to be detention without cause? Enhanced humans fall under special provisions of the National Security Act, Linda replied. Standard civil liberties protections may be suspended when dealing with individuals who pose potential threats to public welfare. Potential threats based on what evidence? Based on capabilities demonstrated here today that exceed normal human parameters by factors that could destabilize social order. The circular logic was maddening, but it was also revealing. These officials weren't here to protect public safety. They were here to maintain existing power structures that enhanced humans might inadvertently challenge. What if we refuse to cooperate? Tommy asked. Refusal to cooperate with legitimate government procedures would necessitate more direct intervention, one of the agents replied. More direct how? Instead of answering, the agent activated a device similar to the sonic disruptor we'd encountered during our first confrontation with hunter teams. The high-pitched whine filled the air, and immediately I felt the effects on my enhanced nervous system. My coordination decreased, my reaction time slowed, and the adaptive capabilities I'd been demonstrating began to shut down. Around the track, other enhanced humans were experiencing similar effects. Sarah stumbled, her supernatural grace replaced by normal human movement. Tommy's speed reduced to conventional levels. Jennifer looked genuinely winded for the first time I'd ever seen. Sonic dampening technology, Linda explained. It temporarily suppresses enhanced neural activity, bringing individuals with elevated capabilities down to baseline human parameters. But as the seconds passed, I began to feel my body adapting to the sonic interference. My adaptive enhancement was finding ways to compensate, developing resistance to the dampening effect. Around me, I could see other enhanced humans beginning to recover as well, their abilities reasserting themselves despite the technological countermeasures. The dampening effect is temporary, Dr. Hoffman observed, her scientific curiosity overcoming her concern about the situation. Enhanced physiology adapts to overcome artificial suppression, which is why more permanent solutions may be necessary, Linda replied ominously. That's when Sarah moved. Her recovery from the sonic dampening had been faster and more complete than anyone else's, and she used that advantage to disable the suppression device before the agents could react. Moving at speeds that made her appear to teleport, she destroyed not just the primary device, but several backup units that other officials were carrying. "Run!" she called out to the enhanced humans scattered around the track. "Disperse now. Regroup later." What followed was unlike anything the government agents had prepared for. Instead of normal humans trying to flee from armed officials, they were dealing with enhanced individuals whose capabilities exceeded every contingency plan they developed. Tommy moved through their formation like lightning, disarming agents before they could draw weapons. Jennifer's endurance allowed her to maintain top speed while carrying others who were still affected by the sonic dampening. Marcus coordinated escape routes with tactical precision that stayed ahead of official attempts to establish containment. My own abilities continued adapting to the situation, finding new ways to overcome obstacles and countermeasures. When agents tried to block my path, my body found ways to move around them that I hadn't known were possible. When they activated new suppression devices, my nervous system developed resistance faster than their technology could adjust. Within minutes, the carefully planned containment operation had become a chaotic pursuit through the streets of Riverside, with enhanced humans scattering in all directions while government forces struggled to keep track of targets who could move faster than their vehicles. But as we regrouped at a predetermined meeting point several miles from the school, I realized the real confrontation was just beginning. The exhibition had achieved its goal of making enhanced human capabilities undeniably visible, but that visibility had attracted exactly the kind of official attention we'd hoped to avoid. "They'll be back," Sarah said as we counted the enhanced humans who'd successfully escaped the containment operation, with better technology, more personnel, and legal authority to use whatever force they deem necessary. "So what do? We do what enhanced humans have always done," she replied. "We adapt, we evolve, we become more than our enemies expect us to be." Over the following weeks, the enhanced human community went through rapid changes that transformed not just individual capabilities, but our entire approach to existence in a world that increasingly saw us as threats. Underground networks that had been developing slowly for months accelerated into sophisticated communication and support systems. Enhanced humans with technological abilities began developing countermeasures to government tracking and suppression devices. Those with cognitive enhancements started analyzing legal and political systems to find ways of protecting our community through official channels. The media coverage of the exhibition and subsequent government response created exactly the kind of public awareness we'd both hoped for and feared. Some people reacted with fascination, others with terror, and many with the kind of mixed emotions that suggested they weren't sure whether enhanced humans represented humanity's future or its greatest threat. But perhaps most importantly, the visibility led to more enhanced humans coming forward, people who'd spent decades hiding abilities they'd never understood. The community that had numbered dozens before the exhibition grew to hundreds, then thousands, as individuals across the country realized they weren't alone. 6 months after the exhibition, I stood once again on the track at Riverside High, but the facility had been transformed into something unprecedented. What had once been a simple high school athletics complex had become the headquarters for the Enhanced Human Advocacy Network, an organization dedicated to protecting and supporting individuals with capabilities beyond normal human parameters. The track itself had been enhanced with technology developed by enhanced humans with engineering capabilities, creating training facilities that could accommodate speeds and performance levels that would have been impossible to imagine a year earlier. The old bleachers had been replaced with observation and research facilities, where enhanced and normal humans worked together to understand the implications of human enhancement. Sarah found me there one evening as I was completing a training session that would have looked like science fiction to anyone who'd witnessed my high school running career. My adaptive enhancement had continued evolving, reaching levels where my performance improvements were measured not in seconds but in fundamental changes to how my body interacted with physics. "Any regrets?" she asked, settling onto a bench that had been reinforced to accommodate enhanced human strength levels. I considered the question seriously. The past year had transformed my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. I'd discovered abilities I'd never known I possessed, faced threats I'd never believed existed, and become part of a community that was redefining what it meant to be human. But I'd also lost the simple comfort of normalcy, The security of blending into ordinary human society, the luxury of not worrying about government surveillance or hunter teams, or the constant pressure of representing something larger than myself. No regrets, I said finally, but I do wonder sometimes what would have happened if we'd made different choices. You mean if we'd stayed hidden? If we'd found ways to use our abilities without revealing them so openly? Sarah was quiet for a moment, watching enhanced humans training on the track with capabilities that still amazed me, despite months of witnessing them. The hiding was killing us, she said eventually. Maybe not physically, but spiritually. We were denying fundamental aspects of who we are, pretending to be less than our potential. She stood up, preparing to leave. Besides, the choice was never really ours to make. Enhanced humans were always going to be discovered eventually. Technology was advancing. Genetic testing was becoming more sophisticated, and there were too many of us to remain invisible indefinitely. So we're better off this way? We're more honest this way. We're living as ourselves instead of as carefully constructed facades designed to make normal humans comfortable. As she walked away, I remained on the track, thinking about the journey that had brought us to this point. From that first practice where Sarah had appeared to be the slowest runner on our team, to the exhibition where enhanced humans had revealed their true capabilities to the world, to the current reality where we were building new communities and relationships that transcended traditional human limitations. The enhanced human community continued to grow and evolve, developing capabilities and technologies that pushed the boundaries of what had seemed possible. Some focused on physical enhancements, achieving levels of speed, strength, and endurance that redefined athletic performance. Others explored cognitive enhancements, developing intellectual capabilities that advanced science, technology, and understanding at unprecedented rates. But perhaps most importantly, we were learning to work together in ways that leveraged our individual enhancements into collective capabilities that exceeded the sum of our parts. Enhanced humans with different specializations could collaborate to solve problems, overcome challenges, and create innovations that no individual, enhanced or otherwise, could achieve alone. The government agencies and hunter teams that had initially tried to contain or eliminate us were finding it increasingly difficult to operate against communities that could adapt faster than official policies could be developed. Enhanced humans with tactical capabilities could predict and counter government strategies. Those with technological enhancements could develop countermeasures to official surveillance and suppression systems. Others with social and political capabilities were working within existing systems to establish legal protections and recognition for enhanced human rights. The relationship between enhanced and normal humans remained complex and sometimes tense. Some normal humans embraced the possibilities that enhanced human capabilities represented, seeing opportunities for collaboration and advancement that could benefit everyone. Others remained fearful or resentful, viewing enhanced humans as threats to existing social orders and power structures. But increasingly, enhanced humans were demonstrating that our capabilities could be used to address challenges that affected everyone. Enhanced humans with environmental capabilities were developing solutions to climate change and resource depletion. Those with medical enhancements were advancing treatments for diseases that had been considered incurable. Others with technological capabilities were creating innovations that improved quality of life for enhanced and normal humans alike. 1 year after the exhibition, I received an invitation that would have seemed impossible during my days as a high school cross-country runner. The International Olympic Committee had announced the creation of enhanced athletic competitions, officially recognizing that human performance capabilities had evolved beyond traditional competitive categories. The invitation was to participate not just as an athlete, but as a representative of the enhanced human community, helping to establish standards and procedures for competitions that could accommodate capabilities that exceeded previous human limitations. Standing on the starting line of what was being called the first Enhanced Olympic Games, I looked around at athletes whose abilities represented the full spectrum of human enhancement. Runners who could complete marathons in under an hour. Jumpers who could clear heights that required redefinition of what constituted a fair competition. Throwers whose distances made existing records seem quaint. But more than individual performances, what struck me was the sense of community among enhanced athletes from around the world. We were no longer hiding our capabilities or pretending to be less than we were. We were celebrating human potential in all its enhanced forms, demonstrating what became possible when people embraced their true capabilities instead of limiting themselves to conventional expectations. The race itself was unlike anything in recorded athletic history. Speeds that would have been impossible to measure accurately just years earlier, distances covered in times that redefined what human locomotion could look like. Performances that suggested the boundaries of physical capability were far more flexible than anyone had previously understood. I won my event, but the victory felt less important than the participation. For the first time in my life, I had competed using my full capabilities, holding nothing back, expressing the complete range of abilities that months of adaptive enhancement had developed. As I stood on the podium receiving recognition for achievements that would have been considered impossible during my high school running career, I thought about how much had changed since that first day when Sarah had appeared to be the slowest runner on our team. The enhanced human community had grown from a handful of individuals hiding their capabilities to a global network of people embracing and developing abilities that were transforming human potential. We had faced government opposition, social resistance, and technological countermeasures, but we had also discovered that enhanced humans working together could overcome challenges that no individual could address alone. Most importantly, we had learned that the choice between hiding and revealing our capabilities had never really been a choice at all. Enhanced humans were part of human evolution, and evolution doesn't ask permission before moving forward. After the games, I returned to Riverside, which had become something of a pilgrimage site for enhanced humans from around the world. The track where Sarah had first demonstrated her true capabilities had been preserved as a memorial to the moment when enhanced humans had stopped hiding and started revealing their true nature. But it was also a training facility, where new generations of enhanced humans were learning to develop their abilities openly, without the fear and secrecy that had characterized previous generations. Children who displayed enhanced capabilities were being taught to embrace and develop their gifts instead of suppressing them. Sarah found me there one evening, as she often did, both of us having made Riverside our permanent home despite opportunities to live and work anywhere in the world. "Any final thoughts on how this all turned out?" she asked. I considered the question, looking around at the facility that had become a symbol of enhanced human emergence into public awareness. I think we did the right thing, not just for enhanced humans, but for humanity in general. How so? Because hiding our capabilities was limiting everyone's potential. Enhanced humans were denying fundamental aspects of themselves, and normal humans were being denied opportunities to understand what human potential really included. Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful. And now? Now we're all learning what becomes possible when people stop limiting themselves to conventional expectations. Enhanced humans are developing capabilities that seemed impossible just years ago. Normal humans are pushing their own boundaries in response to seeing what enhanced capabilities look like. Everyone is discovering that human potential is much more flexible than anyone previously understood. As we talked, I watched enhanced humans training on the track with abilities that continued to evolve and advance. But I also noticed normal humans training alongside them, pushing their own capabilities to new levels inspired by seeing what enhancement made possible. The relationship between enhanced and normal humans continued to develop in directions none of us had fully anticipated. Instead of the division and conflict that many had feared, we were seeing collaboration and mutual advancement that benefited everyone. Enhanced humans were using their capabilities to solve problems that affected entire communities. Normal humans were developing technologies and systems that supported enhanced human development while advancing their own capabilities. The future remained uncertain in many ways, but one thing had become clear. The age of hiding human potential was over. Whether enhanced or normal, people were learning to embrace and develop their capabilities more fully than previous generations had thought possible. And it had all started with a girl who'd been mocked for her running speed, who'd vanished during a race, and who'd reappeared to show everyone what human beings were really capable of becoming. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I still get chills thinking about what happened that autumn afternoon at Riverside High. You know how some moments stick with you forever, replaying in your mind like a broken record? This is one of those moments. The kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew about the world, about people, about what's really possible when nobody's watching. It started with Sarah Chen. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Nobody paid much attention to Sarah when she first showed up at our cross-country practice in late August. Coach Martinez had mentioned we were getting a transfer student, someone who'd moved here from Oregon with her family. I remember thinking she looked ordinary enough, maybe a little too thin, wearing these ancient running shoes that looked like they'd survived the apocalypse. Her dark hair was always pulled back in this simple ponytail, and she had this way of keeping her eyes down, like she was afraid someone might actually notice her. I'm Jake Morrison, by the way, senior year, been running track since freshman year, decent enough times to maybe get a scholarship if I played my cards right. I wasn't the fastest guy on the team, but I wasn't the slowest either. Solid middle of the pack, which suited me fine. I liked observing more than competing anyway, watching how different runners handled pressure, studying their techniques, their mental games. Sarah was different from day one, but not in the way you'd expect. She was slow. Not just beginner slow, not just out-of-shape slow, but genuinely, painfully slow. During our first team run around Riverside Park, she fell behind within the first quarter mile. The rest of us completed our usual 5-mile loop in about 35 minutes. Sarah stumbled in 20 minutes later, breathing hard, face flushed, looking like she'd just finished a marathon. Coach Martinez pulled her aside after that first practice. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I saw him gesturing, probably asking about her experience level, maybe suggesting she start with shorter distances. Sarah just nodded a lot, said something that made the coach frown, then grabbed her water bottle and left without talking to anyone. That's when the comments started. Tommy Rodriguez, our fastest sprinter and biggest mouth, was the first to really lay into her. "Did you see Turtle Girl today?" he announced to the locker room the next afternoon. "I think my grandmother could lap her, and she's been dead for 3 years. The guys laughed, but it was that uncomfortable kind of laughter you hear when someone crosses a line but nobody wants to be the one to call them out. Marcus Williams, our team captain, tried to shut it down. "Give her a break, man. She's new. Maybe she's just finding her rhythm." But even Marcus sounded uncertain. In a sport where seconds matter, where every runner is constantly comparing times and paces, Sarah's performance was genuinely puzzling. I started watching her more carefully after that second practice. There was something about the way she ran that didn't quite add up. Her form was actually pretty good, better than half the guys on our team. Her breathing seemed controlled, not labored like you'd expect from someone struggling that hard. And strangest of all, she never seemed discouraged. Most people who perform that poorly, especially in front of a team full of serious runners, would show some sign of frustration or embarrassment. Sarah just showed up every day, ran her slow pace, finished last, and went home. By the third week of practice, the mockery had escalated. It wasn't just Tommy anymore. Jennifer Walsh, who ran for the girls' team, started making jokes during our shared warm-up sessions. "Hey Sarah, need a map to find the finish line?" she'd call out. "Maybe we should paint some arrows on the trail for you." The worst part was how Sarah responded, or rather, how she didn't respond. She'd just look at whoever was talking, give this slight nod like she was acknowledging what they'd said, then continue with whatever she was doing. No anger, no comebacks, no tears. It was like she expected it. Maybe even deserved it in her mind. During our fourth week, Coach Martinez announced we'd be doing time trials. Individual runs. Just the runner and the stopwatch. To see where everyone stood before our first real meet. The format was simple. 2 laps around the school's quarter-mile track. Fastest time wins bragging rights until the next trial. Tommy, of course, couldn't resist. "Thinks Sarah might actually finish before lunch ends," he announced loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe we should order pizza, give her something to run toward." I was stretching nearby and caught Sarah's reaction. For just a split second, her expression changed. Not hurt, not angry, but something else. Something that looked almost like amusement, like Tommy had just told a joke only she understood. Then her face went blank again, and she started her own stretching routine. The time trials went pretty much as expected. Tommy blazed through his half-mile in 2:15, showboating the whole way. Marcus posted a solid 2:22. I managed a 2:28, which was about what I'd hoped for. The other guys fell somewhere between 2:20 and 2:45, all respectable times for high school runners. Sarah went last. Coach Martinez had suggested she try for a single lap instead of two, but she insisted on the full distance. "I need to know where I stand," she said quietly. It was the most I'd ever heard her speak at once. She lined up at the starting line looking exactly like what she was, the slowest runner on the team, about to confirm everyone's expectations. Tommy was sitting in the bleachers with a few other guys, making a big show of checking his watch and announcing how long they thought it would take her to finish. Coach Martinez raised his starter pistol. "On your mark, get set." The shot echoed across the track. Sarah took off, and immediately I knew something was wrong. Not wrong like she was injured or having a problem, but wrong like what I was seeing didn't match what I expected to see. She was running her usual pace, that familiar, slow, steady rhythm that had become a source of ridicule for the entire team. But there was something about her stride, something about the way she carried herself, that made me pay closer attention. Have you ever watched someone do something they're really, truly good at? There's this quality of effortlessness, this sense that they're not working hard even when they're performing at their best. That's what I was seeing, except it made no sense because Sarah was clearly running slowly. She completed her first lap in 1:45, which was exactly what everyone expected. Tommy started a slow clap from the bleachers. "Come on, Sarah! Only one more lap! You can do it!" His voice dripped with fake encouragement. But during that second lap, I noticed something nobody else seemed to catch. Sarah's breathing hadn't changed. Her form remained exactly the same. Her pace was steady to the point of being metronomic. After running for 3 weeks and consistently finishing last in every practice, she should have been showing some signs of improvement, or at least some signs of effort. Instead, she looked like she was out for a casual jog. She crossed the finish line with a time of 3:42. Definitely last place. Definitely slow enough to keep the jokes coming. But as she walked through her cool-down, I caught her checking something on her wrist. Not a typical runner's watch. Something smaller, more discreet. She glanced at it, nodded slightly to herself, then headed toward the locker room. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. The more I replayed the time trial in my mind, the more convinced I became that Sarah was running slowly on purpose. But why would anyone do that? Why join a competitive running team just to deliberately underperform and subject yourself to constant mockery? I started paying even closer attention during practices. Sarah would arrive exactly 15 minutes before we were supposed to start. No earlier, no later. She'd change in the locker room while everyone else was already warming up, then join us for stretches without making eye contact with anyone. During runs, she'd maintain her consistently slow pace regardless of terrain, weather, or distance. If we were doing interval training, she'd run her intervals at the same speed as her regular runs. If we were doing distance work, same speed. Sprint drills, same speed. It was like she had one setting, and that setting was disappointingly slow. The breaking point came during our 5th week, right before our first official meet. Coach Martinez had arranged a scrimmage against Riverside High, our biggest rivals. Nothing official, just a chance for both teams to see where they stood before the season really kicked into gear. Tommy had been building up to this moment all week. Finally, he announced during Wednesday's practice, Sarah gets to embarrass us in front of another school. Hope Westside brought snacks, because they're going to be waiting a while for her to finish. The scrimmage was scheduled for Friday afternoon. 3-mile course through Riverside Park, the same route we'd been training on since the season started. Both teams would run together, times would be recorded, but no official winners or losers. Just an opportunity to compete and get a feel for race conditions. Friday came with perfect running weather, cool but not cold, slight breeze, partly cloudy skies. The kind of day that makes you want to see how fast you can really go. Westside's team arrived around 3:30, and I could see why they were our rivals. They looked serious, professional, like they'd been training twice as hard as we had. Their coach, a stern-looking woman with graying hair, was studying our lineup when her eyes landed on Sarah. She said something to one of her runners, a tall guy with the build of someone who probably ran collegiate times. He looked over at Sarah, said something back to his coach, and they both laughed. The message was clear. They'd identified our weak link. During warm-ups, I overheard 2 Westside runners talking. The Asian girl in the beat-up shoes, one of them said. Our JV runners could probably beat her. They weren't trying to be cruel, just making tactical observations, but it still bothered me. Sarah, of course, seemed oblivious to all of it. She went through her usual routine, stretching methodically, checking that device on her wrist, then taking her position at the back of the group when Coach Martinez called us to the starting line. "All right, everyone," Coach announced. "This is just a friendly competition, but I want to see your best effort. Show Westside what Riverside running is all about." Tommy shot a look at Sarah. "No pressure, Turtle Girl. Just try not to get lapped." The coaches counted down together. 3, 2, 1, go! The pack took off, and within the first 100 yards, the separation began. Westside's top runners pushed the pace early, testing our guys. Tommy and Marcus responded, staying with the leaders. The middle of the pack, myself included, settled into our race rhythm. And Sarah, predictably, fell behind immediately. By the half-mile mark, she was already 30 seconds back from the main group. By the mile mark, she was completely alone, running her familiar slow pace, while the rest of us battled it out ahead. I was having a decent race, sitting in about 8th place overall. When I made a decision that would change everything, I dropped back. I told myself I was just being a good teammate, making sure Sarah didn't get completely lost or hurt. But really, I was curious. After weeks of watching her, I wanted to understand what was actually happening when nobody else was paying attention. I slowed my pace until Sarah caught up to me, which took longer than I'd expected since I was already running pretty casually. "Hey," I said, falling into step beside her. "How you doing?" She looked surprised to see me there. For a moment, her carefully controlled expression slipped, and I saw something that might have been gratitude. "Fine," she said. "You don't need to stay back here. Go run your race." "I'm good," I said. "Sometimes it's nice to take it easy." We ran together in silence for about a quarter mile. Her pace really was remarkably consistent, and up close I could see that her form was actually excellent. Her foot strike was perfect, her arm carriage textbook, her posture ideal. Everything about her technique suggested someone who knew exactly what they were doing. "Sarah," I said finally, "can I ask you something?" She glanced at me but didn't respond. "Why are you really running so slowly?" For just a moment her stride faltered. Just a tiny hitch, barely noticeable, but I was right beside her and I caught it. She recovered immediately, but I knew I'd hit something. "I'm just slow," she said, but her voice sounded different, less automatic, more careful. "No," I said. "You're not." She didn't respond to that, but I saw her check that device on her wrist again. This time I got a better look at it. Definitely not a running watch. The display was too small, too specialized. It looked almost like some kind of monitoring device, but for what? We were approaching the 2-mile mark when I heard shouting ahead. The lead pack was coming back toward us, which meant we were near the turnaround point. Tommy was in second place behind one of Westside's guys, both of them looking strong. Marcus was close behind in 4th. As they passed us heading in the opposite direction, Tommy couldn't resist. "Still jogging, Sarah?" he called out. "The rest of us are actually racing." The Westside runners saw her too. I heard one of them say something about dead weight to his teammate. They laughed as they continued down the trail. That's when I felt it. A change in the air. Like the moment before a thunderstorm hits. The temperature seemed to drop a few degrees. The birds stopped singing. Even the wind died down. I looked at Sarah, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked angry. Not frustrated, not hurt, not embarrassed. Angry. She checked her wrist device one more time, and whatever she saw there made her nod slowly. Then she looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. "Jake," she said quietly, "you might want to pick up your pace now." "Why?" She smiled, and it wasn't the polite, resigned smile I was used to seeing. This smile had teeth. "Because I'm done being slow." Before I could ask what she meant, Sarah was gone. Not gone like she'd sped up and left me behind. Gone like she'd vanished into thin air. One second she was running beside me. The next second I was alone on the trail, staring at the spot where she'd been, my brain struggling to process what had just happened. I stopped running completely, spinning around in a full circle, looking for any sign of her. The trail was empty in both directions. No rustling in the bushes beside the path, no footprints leading off into the woods, nothing. Sarah Chen had simply ceased to exist. My first thought was that I was hallucinating. Maybe I'd pushed myself harder than I'd realized. Maybe my blood sugar was low. Maybe the stress of the scrimmage had finally gotten to me. But I could still smell her faint vanilla perfume in the air, could still feel the rhythm of her footsteps vibrating through the ground from moments before. I stood there for what felt like forever but was probably only 30 seconds, trying to figure out what to do. Should I call for help? Should I go back and tell the coaches that one of our runners had mysteriously disappeared? Should I continue the race and pretend nothing had happened? That's when I heard the shouting ahead. It was coming from the direction of the turnaround point, where the lead pack should have been heading back toward the finish line. But this wasn't the usual competitive shouting you hear during races. This was confusion, surprise, maybe even fear. I started running again, faster than I'd been going before, driven by a mixture of curiosity and growing dread. Something was happening up ahead, something connected to Sarah's disappearance, and I needed to see what it was. The trail curved around a stand of oak trees, and as I came around the bend, I could see the turnaround point about 200 yards ahead. There was a crowd gathered there, runners from both teams standing in a tight circle, everyone talking at once. I could see Coach Martinez and the Westside coach having what looked like a heated discussion. I sprinted the remaining distance, my heart pounding from more than just the exertion. As I got closer, I could make out individual voices in the chaos. "I'm telling you, she came out of nowhere." "That's impossible. We passed her like 2 miles back." "Check the trail camera. Check the footage." "What trail camera? This is a public park, not a surveillance state." I pushed through the crowd until I could see what everyone was looking at. Tommy was sitting on the ground, his face pale, one hand pressed to his side like he was having trouble breathing. The West Side runner who'd been leading was standing next to him, looking equally shaken. "What happened?" I asked Marcus, who was standing nearby with his hands on his hips, still breathing hard from his race effort. "You're not going to believe this," Marcus said, shaking his head. "Tommy and that West Side guy, Richards. They were battling for first place coming into the turnaround. Both of them were really pushing it. You know how Tommy gets when he's trying to show off." I nodded. Tommy was notorious for his competitive streak, especially when there were opposing runners to impress. So they come around that last curve before the turnaround, both of them going all out, and Tommy's got maybe a step on Richards. They're heading for the cone, probably 30 seconds ahead of everyone else. "Okay, and?" Marcus paused, like he was having trouble believing his own words. "And Sarah was already there." "What do you mean, already there?" "I mean, she was standing at the turnaround cone, not even breathing hard, like she'd been waiting for them. Tommy said she just appeared behind them as they were making the turn. 1 second the trail was clear, the next second she was there. I felt something cold crawl up my spine. That's impossible. I was running with Sarah less than 5 minutes ago. She was still more than a mile behind the leaders. That's what everyone keeps saying. But Tommy and Richards both saw the same thing. They were so shocked they basically crashed into each other trying to avoid her." I looked over at Tommy, who was now standing but still looked rattled. "What exactly did you see?" I asked him. Tommy looked at me like I was asking him to explain how gravity worked. "I told you, man. We were coming around the turn, both of us hauling ass, and suddenly Turtle Girl was right there. Not running toward the cone, not coming from behind us, just there. Like she'd been transported or something." Richards, the West Side runner, nodded emphatically. "He's right. I thought I was seeing things at first. The girl we'd passed way back at the beginning, the slow one, suddenly standing there at the turnaround point like she'd been waiting for us." "And then what happened?" "Then she looked at us," Tommy said, his voice getting quieter. "Really looked at us, you know? And she said something weird." "What did she say?" Tommy glanced around at the crowd, like he was embarrassed to repeat it. "She said, 'Thanks for the entertainment, boys. See you at the finish line.'" The cold feeling was spreading through my entire body now. And then she just took off, not in any direction we could see, not back down the trail or into the woods. She just disappeared again. Richards was nodding along with every word. Fastest thing I've ever seen in my life. 1 second she was there, the next second gone. Like someone had hit a fast-forward button on reality. Coach Martinez had been listening to this exchange with increasing frustration. "This is ridiculous," he announced to the group. "People don't just appear and disappear. You two probably got dehydrated, started seeing things. Sarah Chen is the slowest runner on either team. There's no way she beat you to the turnaround point. But I knew they weren't hallucinating. I'd seen Sarah vanish with my own eyes. Had felt that strange shift in the atmosphere right before it happened. Something was going on here, something that went way beyond normal running capabilities or teenage imaginations. The coaches decided to continue the scrimmage, partly because nobody could figure out what else to do, and partly because stopping would have required explanations they didn't have. The runners who hadn't witnessed the turnaround incident were confused by all the commotion but eager to get back to racing. I rejoined the pack for the return trip to the finish line, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. I kept scanning the trail ahead and behind, looking for any sign of Sarah. Part of me expected her to reappear just as suddenly as she'd vanished, maybe with that mysterious smile and another cryptic comment. But the trail remained normal, just a typical autumn afternoon run through Riverside Park. Birds singing, leaves rustling, the steady rhythm of footsteps on packed dirt. No mysterious disappearances, no impossible feats of speed, nothing to suggest that reality had briefly stopped following its own rules. We were about half a mile from the finish line when I heard the crowd noise. Not the usual cheering you'd expect at the end of a casual scrimmage, but something more intense. Surprised voices, people calling out in confusion, the kind of commotion that meant something unexpected was happening. I picked up my pace, suddenly desperate to see what was waiting for us at the finish line. The other runners seemed to sense it too, everyone pushing a little harder as we approached the final turn. The finish line came into view, and I saw immediately what was causing the commotion. There was a small crowd gathered around the timing area, coaches and parents and teammates all clustered together, everyone talking at once and pointing at something I couldn't see. As I got closer, I could make out Coach Martinez's voice rising above the others. "Check it again. Check the equipment. Something's malfunctioning." I crossed the finish line with a respectable time, but I barely noticed. I was too focused on pushing through the crowd to see what everyone was staring at. The timing equipment was set up on a folding table, digital displays showing race results as runners finished. But there was one result that didn't make sense, one line on the display that had everyone confused. Sarah Chen, 16:42. 16 minutes and 42 seconds for a 3-mile race. That was faster than Tommy's best time, faster than any girl in our school's history, faster than most of the boys on both teams. And according to the timestamp, she'd finished 12 minutes ago, which meant she'd crossed the line before any of the other runners had even reached the turnaround point. "The equipment's broken," the Westside coach was saying. "Has to be. We passed that girl at the beginning of the race. She was barely jogging." But Coach Martinez was shaking his head, staring at the display like it held the secrets of the universe. "I've been using this timing system for 8 years. It's never malfunctioned before." "Then where is she?" someone asked. "If Sarah Chen really finished first, where did she go?" That was the question nobody could answer. Sarah was nowhere to be seen. Her bag was gone from the team area, her water bottle missing from the bench where she'd left it. It was like she'd crossed the finish line, recorded the fastest time in school history, then vanished into thin air. Again. I spent the rest of that afternoon replaying every moment I'd shared with Sarah over the past 5 weeks. The way she'd checked that device on her wrist, the perfect consistency of her running form, the complete lack of effort despite her supposed struggles. The pieces were starting to form a picture, but it was a picture that didn't make any logical sense. That evening, I decided to do some investigating on my own. Sarah had mentioned she'd transferred from Oregon, so I started there, searching online for any high school running records from that state. It took me about an hour of digging, but eventually I found something interesting. A newspaper article from Portland, dated 6 months earlier. The headline read, "Local runner breaks state record, then disappears." The story described a junior named Sarah Chen who had obliterated the Oregon high school record for the 3,000-meter race, running a time that would have been competitive at the collegiate level. But after her record-breaking performance, she'd apparently vanished from the track without talking to reporters, coaches, or even her own teammates. The article included a photo. It was definitely our Sarah, though she looked somehow different in the picture. More confident, maybe. Less careful about hiding who she really was. According to the story, Sarah had transferred to Portland High only a month before setting the record. Before that, There was no record of her competing anywhere in Oregon. The article speculated that she might have been training privately with a coach who specialized in developing elite talent, but nobody could verify where she'd come from or who might have been working with her. The strangest detail was at the end of the article. Sarah's official time had been so fast that race officials had initially suspected a timing error. But after reviewing footage from multiple cameras and checking the equipment extensively, they'd confirmed the result. Sarah Chen had run the fastest 3,000 meters in Oregon high school history, then walked away like it was no big deal, just like she'd done at our scrimmage. I was still staring at the article when my phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, but the message made my blood run cold. Stop looking for answers you're not ready to find. Some secrets are kept for good reasons. Delete your search history. Forget what you saw today. This is not a request. My hands were shaking as I read the message. Whoever had sent it knew I'd been researching Sarah's background. They knew about the scrimmage, probably knew about my conversation with her on the trail. They were watching me, and they wanted me to stop asking questions. I looked around my bedroom, suddenly paranoid that someone might be observing me right now. The windows were dark, the blinds drawn, but I couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes were tracking my every move. Another text arrived before I could decide what to do about the first one. Sarah chose Riverside for a reason. She's not the first, and she won't be the last. Your town has something they need. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. What did they mean Sarah wasn't the first? What could our quiet suburban town possibly have that someone like Sarah would need? And who were they? I was reaching for my phone to call someone, though I wasn't sure who, when a third message appeared. Look outside your window. Every instinct I had screamed at me not to do it, but I couldn't help myself. I crept over to my bedroom window and carefully pushed aside one of the blinds. Sarah was standing in my backyard. She was wearing the same clothes she'd had on during the scrimmage, but now she looked completely different. Gone was the careful, apologetic posture I'd grown used to seeing. Gone was the resigned expression and the downcast eyes. The person standing in my yard looked like an athlete, a competitor, someone who had never been mocked or underestimated in her entire life. She raised one hand and waved at me, not the uncertain gesture of someone seeking approval, but the confident acknowledgement of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Then she pointed at my front door and mouthed a single word: talk. I stood there for a long moment trying to decide if I was brave enough to find out what Sarah Chen really wanted. The smart thing would have been to ignore her, to pretend I'd never seen her standing there, to go to bed and hope this whole nightmare would make sense in the morning. But I'd never been particularly smart when it came to ignoring mysteries. I grabbed a jacket and headed downstairs, my mind racing with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. By the time I reached the front door, I could see Sarah waiting on my porch, hands in her pockets, looking for all the world like a normal teenager stopping by to borrow homework notes. Except normal teenagers don't disappear during races and reappear with impossible times. Normal teenagers don't send threatening text messages from unknown numbers. Normal teenagers don't stand in your backyard at night like they have every right to be there. I opened the door, and Sarah smiled that same unsettling smile I'd seen on the trail. "Hi, Jake," she said. "I think it's time we had a real conversation." I stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind me, but not completely. Part of me wanted to keep an escape route open, though I wasn't sure what good it would do against someone who could apparently bend the laws of physics. "You look nervous," Sarah said, tilting her head slightly. "You don't need to be. I'm not here to hurt you." "Then why are you here?" I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "And how did you get my phone number? How did you know where I live?" Sarah glanced around the neighborhood, taking in the quiet suburban streets, the neat lawns, the porch lights casting small pools of yellow warmth in the darkness. "Riverside is smaller than you think," she said, "and I've been watching this town for longer than you know." "Watching it for what?" Instead of answering, she walked over to the porch swing my dad had installed last summer and sat down, patting the spot next to her. "Sit with me, Jake. There's a lot I need to explain, and most of it is going to sound completely insane." I remained standing, my hand still on the door handle. "Try me." Sarah sighed, the first genuinely human expression I'd seen from her all evening. "Fine. We'll do this the hard way. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out what looked like a small tablet, though the screen was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Instead of the usual bright rectangle, this displayed what appeared to be a three-dimensional map, with moving dots of light scattered across its surface. What is that? Think of it as a monitoring system, she said, manipulating the display with her finger. The map zoomed in, and I could see that it was showing our neighborhood. Our street. My house. Each of these lights represents a person with certain genetic markers, specific capabilities that most humans don't possess. I stared at the device, counting the dots of light. There were maybe a dozen scattered throughout Riverside, which had a population of about 8,000. What kind of capabilities? Enhanced physical performance, primarily. Faster reflexes, increased endurance, improved strength. But the most important trait is speed. Not just running speed, though that's part of it. We can move through space in ways that normal physics doesn't quite account for. We? Sarah looked up from the device. People like me, Jake. People like you. I'm not like you. I can't disappear and reappear at will. Can't you? She stood up, walking over to stand directly in front of me. Think about your best races, your personal records. Think about those moments when everything just clicked, when you felt like you were moving faster than should have been possible. I wanted to deny it, but images flashed through my mind. The regional meet last spring when I'd dropped 15 seconds off my personal best in the mile, seemingly out of nowhere. The time trial 2 years ago when I'd felt like I was floating above the track, my feet barely touching the ground. Moments when I'd surprised myself, when my performance had exceeded what my training should have made possible. Those weren't normal improvements, Sarah continued. Normal athletes don't have breakthrough moments like that. They progress gradually, consistently. But people like us, we have these sudden leaps in ability, usually triggered by stress, competition, or extreme emotional states. Even if that's true, I've never disappeared during a race. Because you've never needed to. Your life has been comfortable, predictable, no real threats, no situations that required you to push beyond normal human limitations. She gestured toward the device in her hand. But the markers are there. Your genetic profile matches our database perfectly. I finally moved away from the door, taking a few steps closer to her. The tablet's display was mesmerizing, all those points of light scattered across what I now realized was a much larger area than just our town. What database? Who's collecting this information? That's where things get complicated. Sarah sat back down on the swing, but this time she looked tired rather than confident. There are organizations that monitor people like us. Some want to study us, some want to recruit us, and some want to eliminate us entirely. Eliminate? Enhanced humans are a threat to existing power structures, Jake. If the general population knew that some people could run faster than cars, could react to danger before it even happened, could move through space in ways that defied conventional physics, how do you think they'd respond? I thought about the scrimmage, the way Tommy and Richards had looked when they described Sarah's impossible appearance at the turnaround point. Fear, confusion, the immediate assumption that they must have been hallucinating rather than accept what they'd actually seen. They'd be terrified, I said. Exactly. And terrified people do dangerous things. So those of us with these abilities have learned to hide them. We pretend to be normal, we underperform in public, we make sure nobody gets suspicious. Is that why you were running so slowly at practice? Sarah nodded. I needed to establish a baseline. If I'd shown up and immediately started running competitive times, people would have asked questions. My background would have been scrutinized. The organizations I mentioned would have been alerted to my presence. But today you revealed yourself anyway. Why? For the first time since I'd known her, Sarah looked genuinely uncertain. Because something's changed. The monitoring system I showed you, it's been picking up unusual activity in this area. Other enhanced individuals moving through the region, but not people like us. These are different. More dangerous. She manipulated the tablet display again, and the map shifted to show a wider view of the surrounding counties. There were new dots of light appearing, these ones pulsing red instead of the steady blue that marked the enhanced humans in our town. What do the red ones mean? Hunters, Sarah said quietly. People whose abilities are specifically designed for tracking and eliminating enhanced humans like us. They've been systematically working their way across the country, identifying communities with high concentrations of our kind, and then neutralizing the threats. Neutralizing? Killing them, Jake. Or in some cases, capturing them for experimentation. Either way, the enhanced humans in those communities disappear. I felt cold all over again, the same sensation I'd experienced on the trail when Sarah had vanished. How many communities? 17 in the past 2 years. Always the same pattern. The hunters arrive, spend a few weeks identifying targets, then conduct what they call cleanup operations. By the time they leave, every enhanced human in the area is gone. I stared at the tablet, watching those red dots slowly moving across the map toward our location. And you think they're coming here? I know they're coming here. The question is whether we can prepare for them in time. Sarah stood up, pacing to the edge of the porch. Riverside has the highest concentration of enhanced humans I've ever encountered. 13 confirmed individuals in a population of 8,000. That's almost twice the national average. Why here? What makes our town special? I've been trying to figure that out for months. There's something about this location, something that either attracts people like us or creates the conditions for these abilities to manifest. But whatever it is, it's made Riverside a priority target. She turned back to face me, and I could see genuine fear in her eyes for the first time. The hunters will be here within the week, and when they arrive, they're going to systematically eliminate every enhanced human in this town. Including you. Including you, I pointed out. That's why I'm here. That's why I revealed myself today, why I broke protocol and let people see what I can really do. We need to organize the others, warn them about what's coming, figure out how to defend ourselves. I looked around the peaceful neighborhood, trying to imagine it as a battleground. What about going to the police, the FBI, someone in authority who could help? Sarah's laugh was bitter. Jake, some of those organizations are the ones sending the hunters. This goes all the way to the top. Enhanced humans are considered a national security threat by people who make policy at the highest levels of government. Then we run, leave town, scatter, make it harder for them to find us. That's what the survivors from other communities tried. The hunters have tracking technology that makes it almost impossible to hide once they've identified you. And besides, running means abandoning everyone who can't run. Your family, your friends, everyone you care about. She was right, of course. I couldn't imagine abandoning my parents, my younger sister, my teammates, even if I could escape. The thought of leaving them behind was unbearable. So what do you suggest? Sarah looked at the tablet again, studying the pattern of blue dots scattered across our town. We fight. We use our abilities openly for the first time in our lives. And we show these hunters that enhanced humans aren't as easy to eliminate as they think. 13 people against however many hunters are coming. Those don't sound like good odds. 13 enhanced humans, Sarah corrected. Do you have any idea what we're capable of when we stop holding back? When we stop pretending to be normal? I thought about her performance at the scrimmage, the way she'd appeared at the turnaround point ahead of runners who'd had a significant head start. I'm beginning to get an idea. That was me at maybe 30% of my actual capability. I was still being careful, still trying to maintain some level of plausible deniability. If I'd really cut loose, really pushed myself, I could have completed that 3-mile course in under 10 minutes. That's impossible. Is it? You saw me disappear on the trail. You saw me reappear at the finish line 12 minutes before anyone else. You got text messages from a number you didn't recognize, warning you to stop investigating. At what point are you going to accept that impossible might not mean what you think it means? She had a point. Everything that had happened in the past few hours had been impossible, according to the laws of physics I'd learned in school. But I'd witnessed it all firsthand. Let's say I believe you, I said. Let's say everything you're telling me is true. How do we find the other enhanced humans in town? How do we convince them to fight instead of run? Sarah smiled, the first genuinely warm expression I'd seen from her. We start with the people you already know. What do you mean? Think about your teammates, Jake. Think about the people you compete against every day. Haven't you ever wondered why certain athletes seem to have that extra gear, that ability to perform beyond what their training should allow? I thought about Marcus, our team captain, and his uncanny ability to pace himself perfectly in every race. About Jennifer Walsh from the girls' team, who could somehow find energy for a devastating kick even after running herself into the ground. About Coach Martinez himself, who despite being in his 50s, could still outrun most of his athletes when he chose to demonstrate techniques. You're saying some of my teammates are enhanced? I'm saying your entire team is a recruiting ground. Why do you think Coach Martinez has such a successful program year after year? Why do you think Riverside High consistently produces runners who can compete at the state level despite being a relatively small school? The implications were staggering. If Sarah was right, then the cross-country team wasn't just a group of dedicated athletes. We were a collection of enhanced humans who'd found each other without realizing what we were. Does Coach Martinez know? He knows something. Whether he understands the full truth or just recognizes that his athletes are special, I can't say. But he's been protecting all of you in his own way, teaching you to control your abilities without acknowledging what they really are. I thought about all the strange training exercises Coach had put us through over the years. The meditation sessions he called mental preparation. The breathing techniques that seemed to help us perform beyond our normal capabilities. The way he always emphasized staying calm under pressure, never getting too excited about good performances. He's been teaching us to hide, I realized, and it's probably saved your lives. If any of you had started setting world records in high school, the hunters would have found you years ago. Sarah looked at her tablet again, and I could see new information scrolling across the display. We need to move fast. The red dots are getting closer, and I'm picking up electronic signatures that suggest they're using advanced surveillance equipment. What kind of surveillance? The kind that can identify enhanced humans from their physiological signatures. Heart rate patterns, brainwave activity, metabolic indicators. If they get close enough to start scanning, our ability to hide becomes irrelevant. I felt a chill of fear, different from the excitement and confusion I'd been experiencing. This was real danger, not just an intellectual puzzle to solve. How long do we have? Based on their current speed and trajectory, maybe 3 days before they reach the outskirts of town. Less if they decide to move faster. 3 days to organize 13 people, most of whom don't know what they are, into some kind of fighting force? 3 days to save everyone you've ever cared about, Sarah corrected. Because once the hunters arrive, they won't just eliminate the enhanced humans. They'll eliminate anyone who might have witnessed our abilities, anyone who could spread information about what they've seen. The full scope of the threat was starting to sink in. This wasn't just about people like Sarah and me. This was about our entire community, everyone who'd been present at the scrimmage, everyone who'd heard Tommy and Richards talking about Sarah's impossible performance. We need to warn people, I said. Get them to leave town, at least until this is over. And tell them what? That superhuman assassins are coming to eliminate the mutants hiding among them? Even if anyone believed you, mass evacuations would just attract more attention from the organizations behind all this. Sarah was right again. Any attempt to warn the general population would likely make things worse, not better. We were trapped in a situation where the only solution was to fight back using abilities most of us didn't even know we possessed. Where do we start? With your team. Tomorrow's Saturday, which means there's probably a practice scheduled. We need to get everyone together and start the process of revealing the truth. I thought about how Tommy had reacted to Sarah's performance at the scrimmage. The mixture of fear and disbelief in his voice. They're going to think we're insane. Then we'll have to show them. Demonstrate abilities they can't deny, help them understand what they're capable of themselves. It won't be easy, but we don't have a choice. Sarah walked back over to where I was standing, reaching out to put her hand on my shoulder. The moment she touched me, I felt something I'd never experienced before. It was like electricity, but not painful. More like energy flowing between us. A connection that went deeper than physical contact. You feel that? She asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. That's what happens when enhanced humans make direct contact. We can sense each other's abilities, share energy, even communicate without words if we practice enough. The sensation was overwhelming, like suddenly being able to see colors I'd never known existed. I could feel Sarah's confidence, her determination, but also her fear. And underneath it all, I could sense something else. Power. Raw, untapped potential that had been sleeping inside me my entire life. "This is what I really am," I whispered. "This is what we all are." The question now is whether we're brave enough to find out what that means. Sarah released her grip on my shoulder, and the connection faded, leaving me feeling oddly empty. But the knowledge remained. I was enhanced. I had abilities I'd never fully explored. And in 3 days, people were coming to kill me, and everyone like me. "I need to think about this," I said. "Process what you've told me." "You don't have time to process, Jake. Every hour we delay makes it less likely we'll be ready when the hunters arrive." She handed me the tablet, and I was surprised by how light it felt, despite its apparent sophistication. "This will help you identify the other enhanced humans in town. The blue dots are confirmed, but there are probably others who haven't been fully activated yet." Activated? Sometimes the abilities remain dormant until triggered by extreme stress or danger. The monitoring system can detect the genetic markers, but the actual capabilities might not manifest until they're needed. I stared at the device, watching the pattern of lights scattered across our town. 13 confirmed enhanced humans, with possibly more waiting to be discovered, against an unknown number of highly trained hunters with advanced technology and government backing. "Sarah," I said, "what if we can't win?" She was already walking down the porch steps, moving with that same fluid grace I'd noticed during our runs together. "Then we make sure they remember that we tried." She paused at the edge of my yard, looking back at me one last time. "Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. at the track. Bring Marcus and anyone else from the team you trust completely. We'll start with them and work our way through the rest." What if they don't believe us? They will. Once they see what you can do when you stop holding back, they'll have to believe. And then she was gone again, not vanishing like she had on the trail, but simply moving so fast that my eyes couldn't track her. One moment she was standing at the edge of my property, the next moment the street was empty. I stood on my porch for a long time after that, holding the tablet and staring up at the stars. 3 days ago, my biggest worry had been whether I'd run fast enough in our next meet to impress college scouts. Now I was apparently part of some kind of underground resistance movement, preparing to fight for my life against enemies I couldn't fully understand. The tablet buzzed softly in my hands, and new information appeared on the display. A message, written in the same precise text I'd seen in those threatening messages earlier. Movement detected on the eastern perimeter. Estimated arrival time, 72 hours. Recommend immediate activation of all assets. This is not a drill. I looked around the peaceful neighborhood one more time, trying to memorize it exactly as it was, because I had a feeling that, after this weekend, nothing in Riverside would ever be the same again. The hunt was about to begin. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those red dots moving across the tablet's display, getting closer to our town with each passing hour. By 5 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely and started making phone calls. Marcus answered on the second ring, his voice groggy but alert. "Jake? What's wrong?" "It's not even dawn yet." "I need you to meet me at the track in 2 hours. Bring Jennifer if you can reach her. And Tommy if you think he can handle something serious." "Handle what? What's going on?" I paused, trying to figure out how to explain without sounding completely insane. "Remember what happened at the scrimmage yesterday? With Sarah?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "You mean the part where she mysteriously appeared at the turnaround point? Or the part where she recorded the fastest time in school history and then vanished?" "Both." "Marcus, I know how it sounds, but there's something happening in this town. Something bigger than cross-country, bigger than high school athletics. People are coming here, dangerous people, and they're looking for students like us." "Students like us?" "Enhanced students. People with abilities beyond normal human limits." Marcus was quiet for so long, I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, he spoke, his voice careful and measured. "Jake, have you been getting enough sleep? Because what you're describing sounds like something out of a comic book." "I know it does, but I also know you felt it too. Those moments during races when everything just clicks, when you feel like you're capable of more than you should be, when your body does things that surprise even you." Another long pause. "Meet me at the track in an hour, not 2. And Jake, bring whatever evidence you have, because if you're right about this, we're going to need more than just your word to convince anyone else." The next call was to Jennifer, who was surprisingly easy to wake up. She listened to my abbreviated explanation without interruption, asked 3 sharp questions about specifics, then agreed to meet us at the track. The call to Tommy was more challenging. He hung up on me twice before I managed to convince him this wasn't some elaborate prank. By 6:30, I was at Riverside High's track facility, sitting in the bleachers with Sarah's tablet in my lap. The device had been updating throughout the night, showing more detailed information about the approaching hunters. There were at least 6 of them, traveling in 2 vehicles, equipped with scanning technology that could identify enhanced humans from a distance of several miles. Sarah appeared just as the sun was cresting the horizon, materializing from the morning shadows like she'd been part of them. She moved differently in daylight, more confident, less concerned about hiding her true nature. "Any luck reaching your teammates?" she asked, settling onto the bleacher beside me. "3 of them are coming. I'm not sure about the others." 3 is a start. Once they see what they're capable of, word will spread quickly among the enhanced community. I looked at the tablet's display, watching those red dots creep closer to our location. The hunters move faster overnight. They're only about 40 miles out now. Sarah nodded grimly. "They always accelerate once they get close to a target area. We probably have 18 hours before they start their preliminary scans." "Is that enough time?" "It has to be." Marcus arrived first, jogging across the track with his usual easy stride. But as he got closer, I could see tension in his shoulders, worry in his expression. He'd been thinking about our phone conversation all night. "All right, Jake," he said, stopping at the base of the bleachers. "I'm here. Now explain to me what's really going on." Before I could answer, Jennifer appeared at the track entrance, moving with the fluid grace that had made her one of the state's top middle-distance runners. She spotted our group immediately and jogged over, her eyes already scanning the area like she expected trouble. "This better be good," she said, though her tone suggested she was more intrigued than annoyed. I turned down a breakfast date with Kevin Chen for this. Tommy was the last to arrive, skateboarding into the parking lot with his usual dramatic flair. But when he reached the track, his cocky demeanor faltered slightly. Something about the serious expressions on our faces told him this wasn't a typical Saturday morning gathering. "So," he said, trying to maintain his usual bravado, "what's this emergency meeting about? Did someone finally figure out how Turtle Girl pulled off her magic trick yesterday?" Sarah stood up from the bleachers, and Tommy's voice died in his throat, seeing her again. Remembering what he'd witnessed at the scrimmage brought back all his confusion and fear from the day before. "Hello, Tommy," Sarah said calmly. "Yes, we're going to talk about my magic trick. And then we're going to talk about yours." "My what?" Instead of answering, Sarah turned to address all of us. "What I'm about to show you will change your understanding of who you are and what you're capable of. Some of you might not be ready for this information. Some of you might prefer to remain ignorant, to continue living normal lives until that choice is taken away from you." She paused, looking at each of us in turn. "If anyone wants to leave now, this is your chance. But if you stay, if you choose to learn the truth, there's no going back. You'll become part of something larger and more dangerous than anything you've experienced before." Marcus stepped forward. "I'm staying. Whatever this is, I need to know." Jennifer nodded her agreement. "Same here." Tommy looked uncertain, glancing between Sarah and the rest of us. "This isn't some weird cult recruitment thing, is it?" "No, Tommy," I said. "This is about survival." He considered that for a moment, then shrugged. "Fine. But if this turns out to be some elaborate senior prank, I'm going to be seriously pissed." Sarah smiled, the first genuine expression of amusement I'd seen from her. "Fair enough." She walked down to the track surface, positioning herself at the starting line of the 400-meter oval. "Jake, would you time me for a single lap?" I looked at my phone's stopwatch function. "Ready when you are." "Don't blink," Sarah said. She took off from the starting line, and immediately I understood why she'd warned us not to blink. Sarah didn't run around the track so much as flow around it, her movements so smooth and fast that my eyes had trouble tracking her progress. She seemed to glide above the surface rather than pound against it, her stride covering impossible distances with each step. I clicked the stopwatch as she crossed the finish line, then stared at the result in disbelief. 38 seconds. Marcus grabbed my phone to verify the time. That's impossible. The world record for women's 400 meters is over 49 seconds. And I wasn't even pushing myself, Sarah said, barely breathing hard after her superhuman effort. That was maybe 60% of my actual capability. Tommy was staring at her like she'd just materialized from another dimension. How? How is that possible? Enhanced physiology, Sarah explained. Genetic modifications that allow for increased muscle efficiency, improved oxygen processing, and altered spatial awareness. In simple terms, I'm not entirely human anymore. Not entirely human? Jennifer repeated. What does that mean? It means we're the next step in human evolution. And it means there are people who want to prevent that evolution from continuing. Sarah gestured for us to gather around her, then began explaining everything she'd told me the night before. The organization's tracking enhanced humans, the systematic elimination of enhanced communities, the hunters now approaching our town. My teammates listened with growing alarm as the scope of the threat became clear. You're saying we're all like you? Marcus asked when she'd finished. You're all enhanced, yes, though your abilities may manifest differently than mine. Prove it, Tommy said, his skepticism warring with what he'd just witnessed. If I'm some kind of superhuman, why don't I feel superhuman? Sarah looked at the tablet, scrolling through data about each of our genetic profiles. Your enhancement is focused on explosive power and reaction time. In high-stress situations, you can move faster than normal human reflexes should allow. That's ridiculous, is it? Jake, do you remember the regional meet last spring? The 200-meter dash where Tommy false started? I nodded. He jumped the gun by at least 1/10 of a second. Except he didn't false start, Sarah said. He reacted to the starter's intent to fire the pistol before the starter actually pulled the trigger. Tommy anticipated the starting signal by reading micro-expressions and body language at a subconscious level, then began his movement before the sound reached his ears. Tommy's face went pale. They disqualified me for that race. Because what you did was impossible according to normal human reaction times. The officials assumed you'd guessed when the gun would fire. Sarah turned to Jennifer next. Your enhancement is endurance-based, but not in the way most people understand endurance. You can continue performing at peak levels, even after your body should have reached exhaustion. I've always been good at kick finishes, Jennifer admitted. Even when I feel completely spent, I can usually find another gear in the final stretch. That's because your body can access energy reserves that normal humans can't tap into. You're literally operating beyond standard physiological limits. Sarah looked at Marcus. And you have tactical awareness. The ability to read race situations, anticipate other runners' moves, position yourself optimally without conscious analysis. Marcus was nodding slowly. I've always known what other runners were going to do before they did it. Coaches call it race sense, but it feels more like I can see patterns that others miss. Because you can. Your brain processes competitive information at an enhanced level. Finally, Sarah turned to me. Jake's enhancement is adaptive. His body learns and evolves in response to challenges, permanently improving performance through exposure to stress. That's why your times have improved so dramatically this season, Marcus said, understanding dawning in his voice. Not just training improvements, but actual physiological changes. I thought about my recent performances, the way I'd felt stronger and faster after each race, like my body was upgrading itself. The breakthrough moments I've had, those weren't normal training adaptations. They were evolutionary leaps. Your genetics, allowing you to become more than you were before. The four of us stood there in silence, processing this information. Everything Sarah had described matched experiences we'd had. Moments we'd explained away as luck, or good training, or natural talent. Assuming all of this is true, Jennifer said finally, what do we do about these hunters? We train. Intensively. We learn to use our abilities consciously, instead of instinctively, and we prepare to defend ourselves and our community. In 18 hours, Tommy asked. Enhanced humans learn faster than normal people, Sarah explained. Your brains are optimized for rapid skill acquisition under stress. What would take weeks of normal training, you can master in hours if properly motivated. She walked back to the starting line. Tommy, I want you to run a 100-meter dash. Don't think about technique or form. Just focus on getting to the finish line as quickly as possible. I'm not a sprinter. I do middle distances. Trust me. Tommy positioned himself at the line, looking uncertain but determined. Time me, he said to Marcus. Ready, set, go. Tommy exploded from the starting line with a burst of speed that caught all of us off guard. His form wasn't perfect, but his turnover rate was incredible, his legs moving so fast they became a blur. He crossed the 100-meter mark in a time that would have qualified him for the state championships. 10.8 seconds, Marcus announced, staring at his stopwatch in amazement. Tommy stood at the finish line, hands on his knees, breathing hard but grinning. Holy shit! I felt like I was flying. Now you understand, Sarah said. When you stop limiting yourselves, when you embrace what you really are, you become capable of extraordinary things. Over the next several hours, we worked through individual training exercises designed to help each of us access our enhanced abilities. Jennifer discovered she could maintain a 5-minute mile pace for distances that should have been impossible. Marcus learned to read tactical situations with superhuman accuracy, predicting outcomes before they developed. I found that my body adapted to new challenges almost instantly, improving performance in real time. But it was Tommy who made the most dramatic breakthrough. Once he understood that his reactions could exceed normal human limits, he began moving with speeds that defied physics. Not just running fast, but accelerating and decelerating in ways that seemed to bend the laws of motion. This is incredible, he said after completing a series of agility drills. It's like I've been walking around wearing weights my entire life, and someone just cut them off. The feeling is addictive, Sarah warned, but you need to remember that using these abilities openly will attract attention from the organizations hunting us. As if summoned by her words, the tablet in my hands began buzzing with urgent alerts. New information was scrolling across the display, tactical data about the approaching hunters. They're here, I said, reading the updates. 2 vehicles just entered the town limits. Sarah grabbed the tablet, studying the information. They're moving toward the school first. Standard protocol is to establish a command post in a central location, then begin systematic scanning of the population. How long before they find us? Their equipment can identify enhanced humans from about a mile away. If they're setting up at the school, we have maybe 30 minutes before their scans reach this location. Jennifer was already moving toward the parking lot. Then we need to get out of here. No, Sarah said firmly. Running will just delay the inevitable. They have tracking technology that can follow us anywhere in town. Our only chance is to confront them while they're still getting organized. 4 high school students against trained killers with advanced technology? Marcus asked. That doesn't sound like a plan, that sounds like suicide. 4 enhanced humans with abilities they don't fully understand yet, Sarah corrected. The hunters are expecting to find normal people who don't know what they are. They're not prepared for conscious resistance from individuals who can access their full potential. Tommy was pacing back and forth, energy crackling through his movements. So what's the plan? We just walk up to their command post and challenge them to a fight? Something like that, yes. Before any of us could object, Sarah was moving toward the school building, her stride covering ground at an inhuman pace. We had no choice but to follow, though keeping up with her required us to push our own abilities harder than we'd ever attempted. The main campus was eerily quiet for a Saturday morning. No maintenance crews, no weekend activities, no signs of normal life. But parked in the visitor spaces near the front entrance were 2 black SUVs with tinted windows and license plates I didn't recognize. Government vehicles, Sarah said, studying them from the cover of the gymnasium building. Probably Department of Enhanced Affairs, though they use various cover identities. Department of what? I asked. Officially, they don't exist. Unofficially, they're responsible for monitoring and controlling the enhanced human population. As we watched, 4 figures emerged from the vehicles. They were dressed in dark clothing that looked tactical rather than civilian, and each carried equipment I couldn't identify. One of them was assembling what appeared to be a large antenna array, while another operated a tablet similar to Sarah's. Scanning equipment, Sarah whispered. They're preparing to map every enhanced human in a 3-mile radius. And then they'll systematically eliminate each target. The lead figure, a tall woman with military bearing, was directing the others with hand signals. There was something coldly professional about their movements, like this was a routine operation they'd performed many times before. "We need to stop them before they complete their scan," Sarah said. "Once they have our exact locations, they can coordinate attacks that we won't be able to counter."